Okay, I've got 6:30, which is our start time. I want to welcome you all to tonight's program, Women Artists, Indigenous Traditions from the Americas. And I just have a few housekeeping announcements before we get started. My name is Cheryl Pemberton. I'm with the Mid-Continent Library. I'm glad you could all join us tonight. I do want to ask if you could keep your mic muted throughout the program. And if you have questions, please go ahead and put them into the chat, and Dr. Lee will answer as many as we have time for at the end of the program. Also, let's see, I will include a link to a survey. I'll put that in the chat, and so I'll put it in the chat at the beginning of the program, at the end of the program, and I'll probably email it. I'm not tomorrow, but I'll probably email it out on Monday because I'm off tomorrow. Okay. I want to take a moment to introduce you to our presenter tonight. Dr. Andrea Lee is an artist, art historian, and arts educator who has worked in the field of visual arts for over 30 years. Along with a Bachelor of Fine Arts degree in sculpture and a Master of Arts degree in studio art and painting, she holds an interdisciplinary PhD in art history and religious studies. Dr. Lee is an assistant professor in fine art and director of the Campanella Gallery at Park University in Parkville, Missouri. Thank you so much for joining us tonight, Dr. Lee.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be with all of you tonight. I want to welcome you and thank you all for coming and for sharing some of your time this evening. I'm going to go ahead and start my screen share. My students can attest to the fact that it's kind of hard for me to walk and chew gum at the same time, but hopefully you're seeing a slide presentation, and we'll get started in just a moment here. But I also want to extend thanks and appreciation, and in addition to those of you who are joining this evening, to Cheryl at the Mid-Continent Public Library and to the wonderful staff also there. Thank you for supporting our communities through the continued learning opportunities and programming that you share with the public. So much appreciated. Shout out to libraries. It's an honor to be with all of you tonight. So let's see. We're going to go ahead and okay, here we go. Hopefully, is everyone seeing a screen with text on the title? Okay,
yes,
great.
Looking good, yeah.
Wonderful. Thanks for that feedback. So this evening, we are going to look at some Indigenous women's artistic traditions from the Americas, mostly from North America, but hopefully we will have time for a few of the cultures from South America, specifically the Andean textiles from Peru. We'll talk about, different pottery traditions, weaving, basketry, clothing, and textiles, especially in North America. And hopefully we'll have time, as I said, to look at some Andean textiles as well. I hope to share with you some traditional art forms created by women, as well as some expressions by some contemporary Native women artists. So what we're seeing on the screen here is a map of North America. The red lines, of course, you will probably recognize as the lines of the boundaries between the United States and Canada. And in the next slide is more of a topographical map. So generally, Native cultures are divided among the different regions and areas of the Americas. And so too, the artistic traditions have regional styles. And in many and most of the communities with I'm familiar, Native American women and men, but we're talking about women artists this evening, utilize the natural environment and the materials around them. And so we see that expressed in many of the artists many of the art that we see. I would also maybe back up a little bit and share with you that among the many languages and cultures of Native Americans, My understanding is that there's not a separate word for the word art. So in these indigenous communities, what we might imagine, seeing in museums, for example, wasn't necessarily created for that intention. Rather, the art was connected to the religious expressions and ideas, as well as the natural environment, and those types of things. So again, there were many different cultures, a lot of different expressions in art. There are regional styles. Most likely, you know that contact with Europeans was largely detrimental to Native American communities through assimilation, warfare, disease, and those kinds of interactions with Europeans or Euro-Americans. Nonetheless, a number of Native communities continued to express themselves through their creative expressions, continued to support and express their cultural identities and traditions. So the connection between art and religion among Native groups really can't be understated, because there's a sense of the materials being sacred in many cases, such as in this feather basket that we're looking at. We'll talk about this work and the previous ceramic vessel that was on the last slide as well. So nature is sacred, animals, and this connection and this interconnection between humans and animals and the environment, it just being a very connected kind of cosmology, really, or identity. So we see among the objects that are created that many of them are functional. So things like this beautifully beaded dress that was both created by a woman and would have been worn by a woman. So functional objects, clothing, ceramics, weavings, blankets, baskets, and those kinds of things. We'll look at some of the ceramic traditions in the Southwest, as well as the weavings from the Dene people, beadwork and quill work, and as shown in this slide, some of the clothing. In many Native communities, there were divisions of labor by gender. So there were spheres, if you will, of work or creation by women and also by men. In terms of the art and the artistry, the gender differentiations, get that word out, weren't hierarchical as I understand them, but rather they were seen as separate but very complementary spheres. So the women's art included basketry, and what we're seeing on the slide now is a storage vessel that would have been created by the Plains women. And in terms of the men's art, which we're not really going to talk about this evening, those included some of the carving traditions, and in some cases some of the painting traditions. So we will begin our conversation with looking at work from the North American Southwest, starting with pottery and ceramics, and then we will continue on with the weaving traditions. So what we're looking at here is a map of the area that we refer to as the Four Corners. So this is, if you're familiar with the US, this is a very dry desert climate, and there are artistic traditions that really date back to very ancient times. So among the Pueblo people in this area, we find these really really ancient historical pottery traditions. We're looking at works by the Membres culture, some, 1,000 or so years ago. And um, we see in the pattern and decoration this propensity for geometry and beautification through the design elements. This early pottery from this culture is primarily black and white, and we also see animal motifs which occur in a number of these objects. In many of the works, this black element here in the slide, it looks like it could be painted, but it's actually a hole that has been pierced into the vessel. And we don't really know why that occurred, but it seems likely, and it's been argued that there's probably a spiritual or religious meaning uh, for the piercing of those holes. Now, the Membres culture did not leave a written record, so that, we don't know for sure that women created these early pottery vessels, such as we see here, again with the geometric designs, the animal motifs. However, given the long-standing and very I would say very deeply rooted tradition of ceramic creation in the Southwest. It seems likely, if not probable, that these early Pueblo vessels and pottery were created by women. Again, because it's such a long-standing, deep-rooted tradition. So this is another very early vessel, a storage jar from the Pueblo people. Again, we see this really stylized geometric patterning. The design elements are really strong. So those early Pueblo pottery objects are what later artists, well, presumably there was a continuation of this tradition, but we're going to fast forward for our conversation this evening to the 20th century and look at some of the works by Maria Martinez, who was arguably one of the most well-known potters from the American Southwest. And she was looking back to and inspired by these early Pueblo traditions. We see some of the geometric designs on her pots. She was really noted for creating what's called this black on black ware. So although maybe in the slide it looks like it could be like maybe black and a little bit silver, the whole vessel is actually it's actually black, and the more, I would say, silvery components. I hope that you can maybe see my arrow. Oh, it looks like I maybe raised my own hand. Apologies for that. At any rate, so those differentiations between the designs are actually, part of it is matte, so that's like a more flat kind of finish, not physically flat, but it's a more dull, if you will, finish. And then the shinier elements are where she has burnished. So a potter can burnish a pot by rubbing it, perhaps with a stone or a hard surface, to create that really shiny surface effect. So Maria Martinez, as I said, became very well known for her pottery. So she's in the early 20th century. She exhibited actually at the St. Louis or at the World's Fair in St. Louis. I don't have the date in front of me, but I recall that I think it was 1903, the St. Louis World's Fair. Oh my goodness. I cannot even believe this. It is, I'm going to go ahead and stop share for just a moment Cheryl, do I have the time right? Is it
It's
6:45?
6:45, yeah.
Okay. And I apologize. So we're going until
7:30.
7:30. Okay. My apologies, everyone. I really sincerely apologize for that. The last presentation that I had at the Mid-Continent Public Library, I was very honored to be there, of course. However, I didn't allow enough time for for questions because my students can attest to the fact that I get really excited about art and I talk a lot and then I go over it. So that's why I set my alarm. So I apologize. I set it for the wrong time. Back to Maria Martinez and exhibiting her work at the World's Fair in St. Louis, right across the street, not the street, right across the state from us in 1903. Her work became very sought after by collectors, and so much so that Anglo collectors encouraged Maria Martinez to sign her work. So in Western art traditions, you think of the individual artists that we may know of. Michelangelo, Raphael, Leonardo da Vinci, and so forth. In the Western art history tradition, it's customary after certain centuries for artists to sign their work. That was not the case in the Pueblo traditions. So, with the encouragement, if you will, of Anglo collectors, Maria Martinez started signing her pottery. Well, for the Pueblo people, that was virtually unnecessary because the pottery in the different pueblos or villages where women would create the ceramics, it was so recognizable and distinct from one another for the Pueblo people that signatures were really unnecessary. So that's some of Maria Martinez's story. Now, we see in this plate or platter, again, that black on black technique that she used, part of it being very shiny and burnished, part of it being very matte and flat in order to get that very distinct look and patterning and decoration. I think that you can see and hopefully identify that motif going around in a circle looks like feathers. So Maria, and then the central area seems to be indicative of a bird, right? So we saw some of the animal motifs in the ancient Pueblo pottery. Now, Maria Martinez didn't really discuss the symbolism of like the birds or any of the motifs on her pottery. However, this is another one of her pots with the stylized feathers. However, among the Pueblo cultures, feathers can be indicative of prayer or symbolic of prayer. And within, so these are some more plates by Maria Martinez. And I believe in the next slide, yes, here we go. So here is the artist herself as she is, or was, she's passed away now, but as she was firing her pottery in this outdoor kiln. So a kiln, for those of you who may not be familiar with art or art terms, a kiln is like an oven that is used to heat up ceramics. And in this case, Maria Martinez had an outdoor kiln, so she would tend the tend the kiln, heat it up. She had a specific way, I understand, of firing her works. in addition to, how she would burnish them to create those effects. And we see the her pottery in the foreground. So Maria Martinez is definitely one of the most well-known potters in the Pueblo tradition. She was from the San Ildefonso Pueblo, located in New Mexico. And this particular work is in a different museum, but I will say that if you are interested in seeing this artist's work, the Nelson Atkins Museum here in Kansas City has some of her works. I don't know that they're on display at this exact moment, but that is a local museum where you can see some of her works. And she didn't just, these are works also by Maria Martinez. She didn't just do this black on black pottery that she was most well known for. These are some works that are, that utilize other colors, obviously. So in addition to Maria Martinez, Leah Nampeo is probably one of the other most well-known Pueblo potters from this region. And in the Pueblo traditions, the pottery and ceramics are mostly or primarily a women's art form. And what I mean by that is that in some pueblos, only the women are allowed to even harvest the clay. They create them. There is a long tradition of women teaching their daughters or their nieces, perhaps. So women learn this tradition from other women in their culture, in their family, perhaps. In this next slide, so this is Nampeo, shown with pictures, or shown with some of her pottery. We'll see when we look at her work that it's a very different look from Maria Martinez. So this is a picture of Nampeo with one of her daughters. She had 3 daughters who also became potters when Leah Nampeo became advanced in age and could no longer see as well. Her daughters and her family would help to paint her ceramics. And this is an example of one of the pots created by, in this case, Rachel Nampeo. So we see this very warm, kind of honey-colored look of the vessel. Again, using, or similarly in some ways to Maria Martinez, who used the geometric patterning. Nampeo was also looking back to these earlier artistic traditions. However, she used different firing techniques, including things like sheep dung to get these really warm, kind of honey-colored effects on the surface of her pottery. Now, in an earlier slide, we saw or looked at the connection between art and religion and life being very interconnected. Well, one of the ways that the sacred or the religious aspects of this culture and of this art form are observed is through the reverential treatment, if you will, an approach of how women may have approached the artistic tradition. So let me explain what I mean by that. When it wouldn't be unusual for a woman to begin by saying a prayer or by praying to the Earth Mother and thanking Mother Earth for the use of her bodily materials, i.e. the clay. So it's this very reverential kind of connection between the creation of the artwork and the connection between the sacred or the sacred stories of the culture. For those who may not know much about the ceramic tradition, this is a very labor-intensive process. So the clay would have to be harvested from the earth and then, you know, refined. So like cleaning out the different elements and perhaps adding different materials so that it can be then molded and then fired in that similarly to the kiln we saw with Maria Martinez. And then I'll say painted, or the decoration would have been added. This is on our screen. It's very large, depending on what you may be, you know, viewing into your computer or something. But this is actually a small seed jar made by Rachel Nampea. We see again that really warm honey color. Very distinctive style, and again for Pueblo people, you know, signatures would have been unnecessary because it was like, of course, that's, you know, that's Nampeo's work. We recognize it. That was Martinez's work, and so forth. But I call your attention to the fact that this is a seed jar, which would have been used to seeds, because it's something that we'll see in a slide coming up here. So this is another ceramic vessel from the Southwest, again with the geometric designs and patterns on ceramic. And then, so here we are with looking at work by a contemporary Native American woman. Her name is Deborah Duwini from the Santa Clara Pueblo. And this too is a seed jar. We're seeing it pretty large on the screen, but it's quite small. It's 2 inches by 3 inches. And on the upper picture, we see like a side view of the little vessel with, in this case, it looks like the lighter areas would have been kind of scratched off, if you will, to create that sense of texture and contrast. And then in the lower picture is looking at the little vessel from up above. So we see her patterning. That little hole in the middle would have been a place where you would presumably drop the seeds, but then, you know, this bird motif, and then this motif from that we see in cultures from the Southwest, the Zuni and Hopi kind of emblem there. So in addition to the ceramic tradition in the Southwest, we will look at a weaving tradition by the Diné people. I have in parentheses Navajo. In a lot of the literature, and even, you know, at signs in museums and things, you'll see the word Navajo. The Diné people prefer to call themselves the Diné. That's the name for themselves. So that's why we're seeing both of those names up here on the screen. Want to be respectful of, respectful of, you know, how people want to define themselves. So in this picture, we are seeing a woman who is weaving, a Diné woman, on this upright loom, which is how they how women in this group, in this cultural group, created their weavings. And next to her are her 2 daughters who are spinning wool. So in the Dene/Navajo culture, sheep are considered to be part of the wealth of women. Part of the weaving tradition is that the women uh, harvest the wool from the sheep, they spin the wool into yarns, and then they create these really remarkable weavings. Some of them were like blankets made to be, worn. Others are technically called rugs, but at any rate, women teaching other women. Again, they're usually through their familial lines, how to weave. And as we saw with this is a watercolor rendition of a Navajo Dene woman weaving in this upright loom, and this is one example of one of the weavings. So as we saw with some of the reverential treatment of or approach to the creation of pottery among the Pueblo women, so too there is religious significance in the creation of the weavings of the Dene women and people. So, and it's related to their sacred mythology. So I'm just going to share a little bit of that sacred story, and that is that the Dene weaving mythology is that the universe was woven out of sacred cosmic materials on an enormous loom by a mythic female ancestor called Spider Woman. If you think about how spiders weave and spin, according to the sacred story, Spider Woman taught Changing Woman, who is symbolic of Mother Earth, the supernatural being, how to weave. Changing Woman is Mother Earth, and she, according to the story, taught Navajo Dene women how to weave. And so for the Dene women, the sacredness is really in the act of transformation of the creation, if you will, of the weaving itself, and not necessarily in the geometric patterning or the symbolisms within the weaving. At least that has not been shared with outsiders. I would like to qualify that. So as with this idea of, Changing Woman or the Mother Earth, so too the Dene women utilize things from the human world and the plant world and the animal world to create these weavings. These really more complex designs that we're seeing in the previous slide and on the picture of the blanket on the left of the screen. These more complex designs came a little bit later, so more like late 19th century, early 20th century. They're called eye dazzlers because they use this really intricate kind of patterning and zigzagging motifs, triangles, and so forth, really bright colors. This was a time when, after the railroads had entered the American Southwest, so like Arizona, New Mexico, that area, and the railroads brought different materials, specifically yarns that were more uniform and that were aniline dyed. So they were synthetically dyed yarns. So the Dene women had access to these brighter colors and different yarns. They were also at this time creating works that were for trade or for sale for more of an Anglo audience or patronage. Get my slides to move. Prior to these eye dazzler blankets, were these so-called chief's blankets. Now, chief's blankets is a bit of a misnomer because they were status symbols, but they weren't blankets or weavings that were made specifically for chiefs or leaders of Native American communities, but rather they were made for trade among different cultural groups. So among other Native American communities, these were traded, sometimes given as gifts and so forth. So this is a really classic example of what's known as a chief's blanket. Again, not exclusively for chiefs, but you may notice that the colors are a little bit softer, a little bit more muted than we saw in that eye dazzler blanket. That in part is because of the natural materials that the women used and harvested to create the dyes for these weavings. And in the next slide here, if I can get it to move, on this picture shows just a sampling of the number of different plants and herbs and materials that a woman utilized from her environment in order to create the dyes to get these different colors for these weavings. And so if you think about it, one would have to have such an extensive knowledge base to understand, to know like when to harvest the different plants and how to process them, how, whether you mix them with other materials and so forth to get the desired dyes that you wanted. And, remember too, that these women were hand spinning the wool. So just an extraordinary amount of work and labor and care and attention to creating just even like a single blanket. So again, this is that same chief's blanket, but out of that tradition then grew these eye dazzler blankets. So these brighter, more complex patternings or patterns on the weavings using that upright loom. This is a detail showing a little bit more of the, how the weaving was created. So weavers use what's like a warp and a weft. So yarns going vertically and horizontally, and then they weave them together. We saw in that picture of that upright loom. So some contemporary Dene weavers include Julia Jumbo, who was very highly regarded for her weaving skills. Again, for the Dene women, the sheep and the that was part of a woman's wealth, if you will, relative wealth. And Julia Jumbo was a weaver that she supported her family through selling her weavings. She looked back to her cultural traditions. In the next slide, so this is one of her works, and this one, apologies that it's a little bit fuzzy, but I wanted to share some pieces where I could, where you can view some of these works in local museums. So this is a work by Julia Jumbo, who, but this is a work that's found over in the Spencer Art Museum at the University of Kansas. So you can see some of these works locally. I'm not sure if it's on display currently, but a very highly celebrated Dene Navajo weaver. Arguably, and she has been called literally the best Dene Navajo weaver who has ever lived, is Daisy Togolichi. And this is one of her weavings. Again, a more contemporary artist, although I believe she has since passed away. But she worked in this traditional art form, created weavings such as this. This is in the Denver Art Museum. And in this particular weaving, she used over 6 miles of yarn, if you can imagine. 6 miles of yarn. And the dimensions are here in the slide, so I can't do math that quickly in my head, but it's just a little over 4 feet wide. And Daisy declared afterwards that she would never, never attempt to do something so difficult, because it was just extraordinary, the work and time and effort. Let's see, I just have a quick statistic about the weaving. It has more than 90 wefts and 20 warps per inch. So we think of like, yarns per inch. Like she just, the yarn would have been so fine, and then she wove it so closely that it was remarkable. This particular weaving, oh, this is a detail of it, ended up being, not ended up, but was celebrated by the U.S. Postal Service. We see in the lower portion of the slide here that Daisy's weaving was commemorated in a stamp from the U.S. Postal Service. We'll look at some of the parfleche and some of the traditions also shown in these stamps. And we looked at the membrace bowl as well. So this artist, weaver, D.Y. Begay, is a Dene woman who also works in weaving. Doesn't this look like a painting? It is remarkable. We immediately recognize, I think, like this beautiful waterscape. There's the very subtle indications of like the waves on a beach. This is all in a weaving. Absolutely remarkable. And so she traveled from the Southwest up to some more northern regions. I believe it was, yes, Lake Superior. And she observed the natural environment there. And then she translated it in this absolutely remarkable weaving. So we see with the work of Begay, she's looking back to, reflecting on her earlier cultural heritage as a weaver, but interpreting it in a new, innovative, and creative way that also adheres to and connects with this idea that people are connected to the land and to our environment, to nature, and those kinds of ideas. So again, she's a contemporary weaver, quite celebrated. In addition to the area in the Southwest, along the coast of what we now think of California, not just on the coast, but the basketry tradition for women in the Californian cultures, including the Pomo, was very strong. Also very connected to this reverential or idea of the sacred and religious, this interconnectedness between life and the earth and the sacred. So women created these baskets, sometimes embellished with feathers that we see here, and or shells, or actually more like beads made of shells and other kinds of precious materials. So for the Pomo artists, they believed that plants and people were interconnected, so that when she harvested the materials for the plants, so these would be like, when she harvested the plants to create the baskets, part of the belief system was that, the plants needed the people to pray for them in the same way that the people needed the plants to provide the material for which they would create these baskets. In the Pomo tradition, men were responsible for creating like nets and things related to, fishing, whereas the women created these baskets, and they used a coiling technique. And we see also the beautification through the use of feathers, particularly woodpeckers. So that's where we get those lovely little red feathers. This is a detail showing those feathers. Some of the baskets, not necessarily the one that we see here up on the screen, but some of these baskets were so tightly woven that they could hold water or liquid. Like that's how strong the construction was. And we may or may not agree that this particular basket almost looks modern, perhaps to our eyes, but it's actually from the 19th century. But we see the decorative patterning in terms of the geometric, the darker and the lighter elements throughout, and just the disbursement of these small feathers that are just kind of reaching out. The Californian basket tradition is one that was more difficult for the communities to continue, in part because the women would, and the men too, but they would have to go out into the land to harvest the materials and so forth. But with with the laws for private land and so forth, it became more difficult for them to collect the materials. But this is another example again of the basketry that was created. In many cases, the baskets would have been used to perhaps hold religious or sacred objects. In some cases, they were used for the processing of acorns, which was a food source for some of the communities. And in many cases, when the creator of the baskets were when she died, her baskets were destroyed. So we're fortunate that some of the baskets have survived. So that's a taste, if you will, of the basketry tradition. And I want to be mindful of the time. So I'm going to just kind of scroll through in the next few minutes some of the artwork from the plains, which were traditionally more nomadic cultures. So we see that the art was transportable. So this parfleche bag is literally like a suitcase that women would have made from the hides of buffalo, bison, would have painted them and cleaned the hides so that they became impervious to the elements and to rain. So they were very very effective. The quill work tradition is important in in a number of the Plains communities, and out of that tradition grew the beadwork tradition. So we see on this traditional women's garment made of hide or animal skin, on the upper portion are the beadwork, and probably the most extraordinary example of beadwork was made by Minnie Sky Arrow, who was from the Fort Peck Reservation, and she created this dress for. I should back up and say that. Well, okay. No, let me get back to Minnie Sky Arrow. Sorry, I'm pressed for time, and I just love this art. So at any rate, Minnie Sky Arrow created this really extraordinary dress, which is covered on both sides. We're looking at the front, but it is covered on the front and the back with this very highly detailed beadwork. It weighs 7 pounds. And it's not a very large dress. I've seen it in person. She was apparently a rather small woman, and she made it for piano recitals. And her son later donated this dress to the Smithsonian Museum. In the lower portion, I hope you can see my arrows. In addition to this really extensive beadwork, in the lower portion, near the fringe of the dress, she has attached these metal, they're like little metal cones, which would add an element of sound, if you will, when the women would move. You could hear like a small tinkling of the sounds. But in the next few slides, I just want to show you some of the beadwork and the details that she was able to accomplish in her beadwork. Absolutely extraordinary. And again, some details showing the fringe, which was made of animal hide, and the beadwork. This is a traditional vest, which would have been worn by a man, but the women would have created the beadwork. These are moccasins, which are traditional shoes. These are our little kids or little children's moccasins. I like this slide because it shows reveals a little bit of the stitching technique, where she would have put a number of beads on a short little string, traditionally sinew, which is an animal material, and then stitched it into the animal skin. This is a baby carrier. And just very quickly, as we finish up, I want to share with you some of the beadwork traditions by some contemporary Native American Indigenous artists. Jamie Okuma, who's shown here in an outfit that she created. She definitely crosses the line between traditional beadwork from her culture, as well as haute couture, like very high fashion. There's been articles published like in Vogue magazine. These are some of her shoes. We see those metal cones on the front of the shoes. So aren't they snazzy? And then these are boots that she created, like hearkening back to these bird motifs and these animal motifs. So the importance of nature and animals, but wow, just like really, really taking it to a level of very, very high fashion. And then this work, again, by Jamie Okuma, using quill work, which was traditionally in the Plains tradition prior to the beadwork, prior to the trade with Europeans for the shinier, smaller, they're called seed beads, these little tiny beads. But wow, her platform shoes. I am going to see if I can maybe stop sharing here in the interest of time. Oh my gosh, I have so many other slides I would love to share with you. I have shared them with Cheryl. I don't know if it's possible for those to be shared like on the library website or what, but I do want to allow at least a few minutes for any questions. I'm reading in the
There's quite a few chat going on in the chat.
yes, thank you. So when I was in the presentation mode, I wonder what they used for dyes. So they used different materials from plants, sometimes from animals. Some of the dyes or some of the paints and pigments and dyes were processed in a very elaborate process. It wasn't like, oh, you could just grind down this mineral and get red, for example. They used, like in the case of that storage, I'm going to call it a storage suitcase, but it's a parfleche. The red coloring came from using a yellow mineral that she had to heat up and mix with other things to get the colors that she wants. So it was a pretty extensive process in some cases. So yes, there's interesting stuff on weaving in Greek mythology. Oh, wonderful. Glinda, apparently, Glinda York, thank you. Apparently you were already familiar with some of the artists. I hope that those of you who may not have been familiar at least learned something about some of the cultures or artistic traditions. I agree, whoever wrote, I can't imagine how long it would take to make something that beautiful by hand or even with some tools. What's that last one's design meant to represent? It has a tiny seed hole. Okay, I think that might have been the small
The seed bowl, I
temporary.
think.
Yes.
Mhm.
So it had the bird motifs and then also the more stylistic design that is from the Hopi and or Zuni culture, and it's a sacred symbol, basically. I want to see if, and Cheryl, please feel free to jump in the last few minutes that we have together. Oh,
Okay.
wonderful. Someone's shared a resource book that you can find at Mid-Continent Public Library. Yay, another shout out to our library.
And there's a link to that book in the catalog if you are
Oh,
interested in that book.
wonderful.
Yeah, in fact, and
Wonderful.
there's another book that's mentioned later about called Indigo in Search of the Color That Seduced the World. There's a link to that book also. They're both in our catalog collection. Yeah.
Wonderful. Another good resource is the Native American Museum that's connected with the Smithsonian. And if we have any teachers in our audience this evening, it can be a good resource for teaching materials, for sharing with students. Lots of they have their collection online, so you can search the collection. It can be kind of overwhelming with the number of objects that they have. Yes, there's interesting stuff on weaving in Greek mythology as well. Absolutely.
Okay. And then one question about where the Dine people lived, and somebody answered the Four Corners area. Is that?
Yes, the Four Corners area, specifically Arizona, but in that area.
Okay. And how do people weave feathers or beads into their designs?
Oh my goodness. The short answer is with great difficulty and skill. Right? So, I mean, imagine you're holding the materials together and then probably tucking, in the case of like the California or the Pomo basketry, tucking the harder part of the feather, I'm not sure what it's called, the shaft, if you will, of the feather, or the quill, rather, excuse me, the quill of the feather, as you are looping the softer material around it. And so like the plant material would have been more pliable. So when it was probably more green or freshly harvested, so that it was in some cases softer and more easy to manipulate as a material. Great question.
I wonder what the materials they were used for the main part of the basket, not the decorative elements.
Oh, so those were plant materials, and they used things like willow and other. I don't know if I have in my notes the different. I know that willow was one of the preferred plant materials. Other plants and grasses were what the base, if you will, of the baskets were created from.
Okay, and oh, I wonder what's usually used for the green dye, or do they just mix blue and yellow? And what do they use for these colors?
I don't know if you are asking about the dyes for the wool. I believe that those were not red and blue, or excuse me, you used the word, was the example
Blue and yellow,
green?
yeah.
Blue and
Yeah.
yellow for green.
Mhm.
I believe that and I'm not 100% sure in all of the cases, but I believe that there were specific materials that would have been used to create green dye, for example. But of course, given the complexity of some of the processes to create some of the dyes and paints and pigments and things, it's definitely not improbable that blue and yellow, of course, could have been mixed for green in some cases. They're also beautiful and unique. The round shields are beautiful too, yes. Some of the shields in the Plains traditions were more of a male art form.
Okay, someone asked about the slides. I don't know that we can post, we don't have a way to post the actual slides, but let me, maybe I can chat with you or email you after the program and see if there's something we could do.
Yes.
Getting the slideshow out. Again, I'm off tomorrow, so we'll have to be on Monday.
Fair enough. We're all getting into the holidays and holiday seasons. Oh, Tina and Jacob love to see the dresses in person. Yes.
Okay,
Yes, the
here's
dancers are extraordinary.
okay, there's a follow-up on the dyes. I meant more specifically what plants around them would have worked for different colors or maybe possibly minerals around them to get the colors.
I don't really know the answer to that question.
Okay.
I could quickly pull up the slide that had the different plants and herbs. I don't know if you're seeing it now. Is that showing up?
Yes, yeah.
Okay, so oh, it's not letting me make it bigger. The plants are actually, if you wanted to take a screenshot of this could give you perhaps a place to start with some of the plant materials that were used used by the women for some of the colors in the dyes.
Oh, okay, there we go. Interesting. Let's see. Have you seen the new exhibit at the Nelson Art Gallery about the Mesoamerican art?
That is a wonderful plug. I have not yet seen it. It's so exciting. I'm really looking forward to it. Have you seen it, Mary Beth?
I would be curious how long it's going to last. Usually they run quite a while, and I just don't see how I'm going to get down there before Christmas even. But I'm hoping, yeah, it lasts through January, February.
I hope so too. I would
Yeah.
expect it to. I would
If I had
expect.
another screen, I'd look it up, but I don't, I've got too many screens going as it is. Okay. Um, the
Yeah,
dyes on the dress. Okay.
some of the cultures did use reeds for their weavings. We didn't look at some of the weavings from the Northwest coastal tribes, but they used like mountain goat wool as well as cedar bark and used a finger weaving technique, which was really, really extraordinary. Oh, great feedback from Mary Beth about the Mesoamerican exhibit at the Nelson. She saw it last Sunday.
Oh.
Very good. Very good. Yes. We didn't have time to cover everything, including Mesoamerican um, and the Andean textiles. So next
Okay.
time.
I think we are at the end of our questions for the evening. It sounds like everyone really enjoyed the program, and I'm glad that everyone could join us. Oh, I should throw my, let's see. Okay, I think that's all. I'll see what I can do about getting the slideshow available for viewing. And the program should be up on YouTube probably on Monday, probably no sooner than that, especially since I'm not going to be here tomorrow and I have to bug someone else to do it. So I won't be there to bug him tomorrow. Okay. Oh, it ends February 8th. Oh, thank you. Is it Claire? Yes, good. I'll have plenty of time to get there after Christmas. Thank you for looking that up for me. Okay, everyone, I'm so glad you could join us tonight. Thank you so much for your wonderful program, Dr. Lee. I can't wait to get down to the Nelson now. You inspired, well, I was thinking about it anyway, but now you've totally inspired me to go down to the Nelson. My husband and I really enjoy it. So, okay, thank you all. Have a good holiday. We're just a week away from Thanksgiving. And good night, everyone. And thank you for joining us.
Yes, thank you all for spending time together this evening. I've enjoyed being with you. Good night.
Thank you, Dr. Lee.